Welcome to Breaking the News Plus on this Wednesday night. Next week, there is an election in lots of different cities in Minnesota for lots of different things. Tonight, we're going to talk about the mayoral election in Minneapolis. And to do that, we've brought on Eric Roper, a columnist with the Star Tribune, who has been covering this race from the beginning. Hey, Eric, thanks for joining us tonight.
Thanks for having me.
So, Minneapolis, the reason of the focus is, one, your fault. Your column today always tries to make sense, or today it tried to make sense of the ranked choice voting that is offered to voters in Minneapolis for lots of great reasons. However, what's going on is we have this incumbent in Jacob Frey, and then we have several challengers, most notably Omar Fateh, because he, for a brief moment, had the DFL endorsement. That was rescinded. But now Fateh and two other candidates seem to be on a slate of one saying, pick us first. And is that what's going on? The three of them are asking for people's votes as kind of like a group. Why?
It's funny. It feels like depending on who you ask about this among the candidates, you're going to get a slightly different explanation about precisely what the slate means. So I hesitate to interpret it exactly, but let's say it's an alliance between the three candidates who are running against Mayor Frey. And the reason why this makes sense is sort of twofold for them. If we're imagining the potential reasons why you might do this, one is for Jas Hampton and Duane Davis after the convention, they really needed name ID. The convention with Fateh receiving the endorsement temporarily. This created a very sort of a binary narrative, whether it was fair or not, but he won the endorsement, and that sort of elevated Fateh. And so I think there was something appealing to having, for example, mailers, or these are like campaign literature, being people going door to door with campaign literature with all three faces on it. So if you are one of the other campaigns, I think there's something appealing about that. But the other element of it is that the only chance that any of these candidates, any of these challengers have of winning is to secure second and third choice votes. So if you're Duane Davis, you have to imagine there's you have to be sort of appealing to, or Jas Hampton, you have to be appealing to people who support the other candidates. And so I think that's another incentive for it. But one thing I note in the column today that's unfortunate is that they have been less willing to discuss their disagreements with Senator Fateh. And frankly, Senator Fateh's platform is much farther to the left, as far as I can tell, than Reverend Davis and Jas Hampton. And so, it's an interesting dynamic. We haven't seen it play out quite this way in a previous election, although in 2021 there was something almost like this in the Minneapolis mayor's race. But this is sort of a refined version in some ways of what happened in 21.
You bring up a great point, Eric. When you see them as this kind of like coalition of three, it would be not ignorant to assume that the three of them their politics are the same. But that's just not true. Fateh's politics are different than Davis and Hampton.
Right. And I think, the people pointing that out, not in relation to Davis and Hampton, but the people really defining Fateh's politics, apart from Fateh himself, are Frey and his allies. And I think, all the people in this election are liberals of some sort. I mean, this is Minneapolis. These people were all seeking the DFL endorsement. And so, I think for voters, it can be a little tricky to discern. And I frankly wrote columns this summer specifically about Duane Davis and Jas Hampton, trying to sort of dig into their policy positions and how they fit into the race and sort of the spectrum of positions. The other thing about it, I've just been mulling today about the fact that, there is so this is the ranked choice voting is creating an interesting scenario or an interesting alliance. The alternative would be that, for example, to go to a primary, for example, maybe your only options are Frey and Fateh, or you have four candidates, but if you are sort of somewhere in the middle, you might be voting sort of more out of fear of one candidate than support of another candidate. So I think there's advantages to ranked choice voting, but it's also creating sort of this interesting dynamic that we haven't seen anything quite specifically like this before. So I think there's sort of like it's a bit of a mixed bag.
So So help me understand this from a voter's perspective. If a voter, let's say, is into Duane Davis, Reverend Davis, is the ask of the Davis campaign that you vote Davis first and then the other two second and third to eliminate Frey? Help me, like a fifth grader, understand ranked choice voting.
So all of the candidates, just to be clear, would like you to vote for them first. That is very clear. There is some disagreement about whether, for example, Jazz Hampton says, I never said don't rank Frey. So he sees this in a certain way. And the candidates have not cross-endorsed each other. So they're not necessarily sort of making big pronouncements about who to vote for except for them. So it's frankly very confusing. They all kind of have different interpretations of it. And so, the thing that I spoke to Reverend Davis and Jazz Hampton about this, first of all, I think they want to make clear, like, they're in this for, to promote what they are doing. They want your vote, number one. And I think, but if we sort of peel back the curtain and think about some of the incentives here, like there is an incentive for them to be picking up supporters of these other candidates. Because frankly, like, the likelihood is that on the first ballot, which is the first round where we're thinking about first choice votes, that the likelihood is that the mayor will be probably in the first position there. And so when we start reallocating, it's part of the question is like, what is the order after that? Mm-hmm. And so getting second and third choice votes will be a big deal for these campaigns as they try to sort of build up enough to overtake the mayor's votes. The mayor doesn't really he doesn't talk about ranked choice voting, or not that I can really see. He doesn't really get into who else, whatever slate or anything like that as far as ranking goes.
Yeah, I was going to ask you that. So Mayor Frey seeking a third term here. He's presenting it seems, in terms of his ads and things he says on social media and at debates like the one you hosted, as a binary choice. He's treating this race, to me, as it seems like he's running against Omar Fateh.
Well, and I've been really trying to stress this summer that this is not a binary race. I think that Reverend Davis and Jazz Hampton, they bring a lot to the campaign. I wrote columns about each one of them, trying to discuss that. And so I wouldn't get caught up too much in what the Frey campaign or any campaign or the PACs are saying about who the choices are and who they're not. I think one of the benefits of ranked choice voting is that you don't have to think too hard about whether the person that you're voting for is the most viable candidate, because you have other options down the ballot to be sort of ranking and determining, if you have if you are sort of worried about things going in a certain direction, you could sort of make your third choice vote sort of in that way. But, and this is something I'm thinking about right now as one of the benefits of ranked choice voting. Obviously, there's this alliance, and that's kind of a new thing. But, the alternative would be a much more binary choice. And if they're saying, we can imagine there's elections in the past where there's been spoilers. And I think that in a ranked choice scenario, one of the greatest things about it is that there aren't really spoilers. You can vote your first choice just however you feel in your heart. And not have to worry about whether that is the most viable candidate or not. And so I think that that's something I've been thinking about more here in the last couple of days, because I think that, a lot of people are just tuning into the race, and you don't want to have to get, again, I wouldn't get too caught up in what the campaigns are saying as to who is viable. The other reason for that is that polling in these races is notoriously unreliable. We don't know what the turnout is going to be. There's also a lot of negative advertising right now that's directed at Omar Fateh. So I think that a lot of voters are just waking up to the race now. Fateh is under, he's getting a lot of ads directed at him. And so who the most viable candidate is really hard to say. I think the likeliest thing we can say is that we know that there are 4 candidates who are, I think, viable. So I think people should consider their choices, but don't get lost in what the campaigns are saying about binary races. It's not a binary race as far as I'm concerned.
And to that point, last question here. That's kind of the spirit of ranked choice voting, is to do away with that adage that you're throwing away your vote if you're voting for somebody that's not the one that's getting the push, publicly or through ads. Like, ranked choice voting affords you the opportunity to vote your conscience the way you want to, and it's not throwing it away. It's an interesting way to do it.
Right. And I think that, and you have your 3 choices. I think, it can be a little intimidating for voters who are just now tuning into the race. Sometimes it's hard enough to make up your mind about one candidate, let alone, thinking about 3. You don't have to rank all 3. If you just have 2 that are interesting to you, that's fine as well. But I think it gives you some flexibility. And if there are, if there are candidates in this race that you find, that you have 3 others, right? We have basically 4 top candidates in the race, and we have 3 spots on the ballot. So people can sort of make up their minds within that. And, what we see is that a lot of people are doing their homework right now. They're going back through coverage of the last couple months. They're doing their reading. The election's on Tuesday, just a couple days left. And so I think this could go in lots of different directions. And I think that either way, I think that the alliance will be something that we're looking back on and trying to decipher, like, who did this help? Was it the right idea? It's a little hard to say in the moment, but I think it's an interesting dynamic, and I think we're going to be sort of unpacking it as we go forward.
That'll be interesting post-election. I'm sure you'll do a great job at it. Eric Roper from the Star Tribune, a columnist. If you want to check out his piece today on this mayoral race and this alliance and ranked choice voting, please do so at startribune.com. Thanks for being on the show tonight, Eric.
Thanks.
That's all for Breaking the News Plus on this Wednesday. We'll see you next time.